Boropolis podcast. As usual, I am joined with Nathan, and if you're watching on YouTube, you'll already be able to tell that the pair of us are already struggling to contain our large grins that haven't really changed since full time yesterday, Nathan. It's been a week filled with joy, filled with 6 points, and filled with derby delight. Nathan, I mean, usually I ask how you are, but I'm expecting you to be on cloud nine, to be honest, because I still am, really.
Well, yeah, I am as well, but just remember, Chris, it's not a derby because Sunderland didn't win.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm fantastic, as you can imagine. 2 wins in a week. Last week, it was the same. And I didn't want to get too carried away last week. If you listened to last week's podcast, you will have known that. And this week, I felt was going to be a really big test for us. 2 sides that have started the season really well in Cardiff and Sunderland. And we've got 2 wins, and it's bloody fantastic to be talking about it. So, yeah, I think we should just get right into it, Chris, and crack on.
Yeah, listen, I can't wait to get into it. And obviously, the main talking point that, I'm sure people watching and listening will want us to get on to quicker than we probably usually would do in a 2-game podcast is obviously the Sunderland game. But there was the Cardiff game. But before we do that, having listened back to a little bit of last week's podcast, something dawned on me after full time yesterday. And it was that in last week's, we did get an update on the Roods Arms. For those that didn't listen or watch last week, it is Nathan's new Sunday League team. And after 2 wins last week, I felt that maybe it may be the beginning of a good luck charm. And maybe it is the reason why we have had so much success of late. So, Nathan, I'm going to quickly ask for an update from this weekend's fixture.
Yeah, Linthorpe Academicals at home this morning, and it finished the Roods Arms 9, Linthorpe Academicals 5, as you can see and hear, a goal galore game. Yeah, I mean, as you can imagine, a few of the boys were a little bit rough after last night, with the Borough result yesterday. But yeah, we've turned up and scored a bucket load of goals. Standout player of the match, Tom Bryn, or Rooney as we call him, scored 4 this morning. Running out of superlatives to describe that lad, if I'm honest. But yeah, there is your weekly Roods update, with the Roods sitting second in the league on goal difference, but a maximum 12 out of 12 points so far.
Yeah, well done to Roods this weekend. I mean, as you mentioned, really, put on Twitter last night in response to a tweet that you put on yourself on the Boropolis account about toasting the victory, that we do actually have a podcast to record tomorrow. Of course, that was last night. And I mean, the fact that you had to get out of bed to play a football match after your antics last night was something that I didn't think was going to be possible, to be honest, after some of your messages that I received last night. But do you know what? A huge well done to Roods for the result, but also yourself for actually getting out of bed and playing a football match after what was quite a heavy night by all accounts.
Yeah, it was a tough ask, if I'm honest, and I'll give myself a little bit of a pat on the back for that. But yeah, a good weekend in terms of the football from myself.
Yeah, absolutely. And with that update, we can now go back into the main theme of this podcast, obviously Middlesbrough. And as much as I want to just talk about yesterday's result, we did have a win earlier on in the week, Tuesday night, of course, Cardiff at home. And as you mentioned earlier on in the podcast, look, last podcast we sort of, again, we fixated a little bit on Sunderland, but we did basically discuss that Cardiff were going to be no pushovers. They went into the game on a really good run of form, sat 6th in the table before obviously kick-off. And listen, they had a couple of injuries. Of course, Aaron Ramsey was the big one that they were missing. But actually, a really, really promising result, and actually, I think perhaps more impressive given the shock factor of when that lineup come out before the game. There was some real surprises in there.
Yeah, there was a lot of changes from the win over Watford, and a few surprise names in the team. Of course, the standout name in that lineup was Lucas Engel. Of course, it's his first start since that torrid evening at Hillsborough a few weeks ago. Dan Barlasser in midfield as well, of course, performed quite well in the League Cup victory against Bradford the week prior. And of course, Sam Greenwood making his first Middlesbrough start as well. So 3 standouts there in the team. Johnny Howson missed out of the game fully because of illness. Darragh Lenihan came back into the side, the squad, sorry, after his illness that ruled him out of the Watford game. And yeah, Rav van den Berg as well missed the game through injury. So yeah, it was a little bit of wholesale changes, I think, and I don't necessarily want to say that Carrick was possibly resting players before this weekend's game against Sunderland, but possibly looked like that. And in the end, it paid off with a bit of squad rotation as well, because all 3 of those players that were named in the team that caused a little bit of a stir all performed really well in the game.
Yeah, and obviously just, touching on the injuries and the changes, of course, since we last done the podcast, we now have a bit of a time frame on Lewis O'Brien. Of course, I think we kind of went over it last week and said that it sounded and looked like a serious one. Obviously, we now know that that's potentially going to be 2 to 3 months. So we knew before the game that he was not going to be involved, Nathan. But also, like you say, there was sort of wholesale changes almost from nowhere, because I don't think anyone expected the illnesses, obviously not. But more so the fact that Rav van den Berg, who has struggled a little bit with injuries, he seems to get in the team for maybe 1 game and then come back out for 2. And it's a little bit frustrating at the moment, because obviously Michael Carrick can't stop singing his praises when he does perform, and we've all seen his quality. So yeah, a little bit frustrating in that sense, but also, as you say, an opportunity for a few players which haven't really had the sort of opportunity to, really stake a claim in the side. And, one of those in particular, as well as Dan Barlasser, that was sort of more injury enforced, was Sam Greenwood, who obviously come into the team and replaced Matt Crooks. That wasn't, as far as we're aware, anything to do with injury, but as you say, probably a little bit more in terms of just freshening up the team, a little bit of rotation. And yeah, look, the first half, I think we could probably skip over it in about 20 seconds, because there wasn't really any talking points. Neither side sort of dominated the half at all. The main talking points really were the sort of moans and groans at the fact that Paddy McNair wasn't passing the ball to Lucas Engel. Frustration was growing a little bit in that first half, and it wasn't a case of, as I say, that Cardiff were on top and the frustration was coming from that. It was the fact that for what felt like most of the first half, it was just a game of passy involving Dale Fry and Paddy McNair, who were just looking for options, but just couldn't really, find that pass to break into the midfield and sort of transition Middlesbrough just from holding the ball to a bit of an attack. And that was the overriding theme, really, until things started to sort of kick into action in the second half.
Yeah, it was a really sort of strange first half. Neither side really taking the initiative really in the game. Both sides did have 1 good chance each. Greenwood had a good effort for Borough that was tipped over the bar, and Karlan Grant probably should score, being set through on goal. Dieng makes himself big, makes a really good save in that first half. But yeah, neither side really offered too much in the first half in terms of chance after chance. But yeah, as soon as the teams came out in the second half, Borough were much the better side in the game, and sort of got the just rewards for coming out so quickly in the second half with the goal. And I was so happy that it came down the left hand side and sort of materialised the way that it did, with Barlasser playing it to Engel. A really good ball in the first instance that was just uh, too far for Coburn to reach. And then the ball gets cleared away. Engel's quickest to react, beats Ollie Tanner to the ball, drives to the byline, gets sort of like a driven low cross across the box. And there's Isaiah Jones coming in, probably no more than 3 yards out, sliding in and getting a toe to the ball. And yeah, it did feel like a game where whoever went into the lead was always going to win the game, really. And yeah, Borough got that first goal of the game, and yeah, we're pretty comfortable from then on, really.
Yeah, we were, and it's interesting that you're saying. Obviously, that was sort of, apart from the result, that was the main talking point of everyone leaving the stadium, and those that might have watched it at home, I'm sure it would have been as well. But Lucas Engel and his look, I don't want to say redemption just yet because it's still early days in regards to, it's only 2 performances since he was hooked at Sheffield Wednesday. But looking forward, I think it was quite interesting in the fact that actually, when the team lineup was announced, I think most Middlesbrough fans would have seen it as a success if Lucas Engel had made it past halftime and wasn't hauled off again in terms of a performance going forward from that Sheffield Wednesday display. And thankfully, he sort of, definitely exceeded any expectations in the second half. And it was quite funny, actually, because in the first half, as I say, there were sort of moans and groans where he wasn't getting the ball. And then actually, in the second half, he becomes sort of the driving force, which enabled us to take the lead. And following that, you saw the boosting confidence that he had, playing one-touch passes, getting to the byline, being that creative outlet down the left. But I think the initial boost of confidence perhaps comes from just a few moments before we take the lead, where I'm not going to lie, from my seat, I didn't think that he had touched it, but Ollie Tanner has that effort which clips I don't know if it clips the crossbar or the stanchion where the post and the crossbar meet. But you think if that goes in, well, of course it's going to be a different game. As you say, it did feel like a case of whoever took the lead would probably go on and win the game. And then after the game had finished and we saw post-match quotes from Michael Carrick, he spoke of the importance of that touch that Engel had got to basically stop that being a goal, because without the touch, you look at the highlights and see the trajectory of the ball, and Ollie Tanner scores without it. So I guess you may see from that Lucas Engel gains the confidence to get himself a little bit higher up the pitch, whip a good ball in. And as you say, what's been really evident for me from Lucas Engel, even when he hasn't performed his best, is he's got a real appetite to go and win the ball. He doesn't hold off. He wants to try and put the man that he's marking under pressure. And we spoke about it earlier on in the podcast this year, where we were saying, it was quite strange the fact that Middlesbrough had gone from a team that we all know the right back tucks in, forms the back three almost, and then the left back bombs on, obviously Ryan Giles, yada, yada, yada. But we hadn't really seen that even when Engel was introduced against Huddersfield, it would have been. But actually, I think since Lewis O'Brien was introduced to the team at left back, we've almost seen Carrick revert to tactics from last season, and clearly tactics that just work for this Middlesbrough lineup. The players that we have, and obviously because of that, Lucas Engel's been allowed a little bit more license to get forward. And we're seeing the quality that he does possess. As you say, his first cross is a great cross, actually. Colburn's unlucky not to sort of direct it goalwards, and then that anticipation and that hunger and desire to go and win the ball back smash one across the face of goal, and obviously it creates the first Nathan. So massive credit to Lucas Engel. But was there a question of offside in this goal? Because I've seen a few angles which looked a little bit dubious. I think the Cardiff manager was quite upset about it. From my angle, I'm not going to lie, for those that might not have listened before, me and Nathan sit lower west, and initially I thought the flag's about to go up.
Yeah, I was the same. I did sort of look towards the linesman on that far side just to make sure that me jumping up wasn't going to leave me with egg on my face a little bit. But yeah, it's one of them. In a week where refereeing decisions have dominated the headlines in the Premier League, the Championship doesn't get too much of a look in terms of controversial controversial refereeing decisions making the headlines. But yeah, he's possibly a yard or so offside. But yeah, I'm not going to complain too much because it gets us into the lead, and it sort of made the evening a lot more comfortable, really. And that doesn't necessarily paint the second goal how it actually came about, really, because it looks like, if you just watch the highlights of the game, it looks like Cardiff are mounting pressure on Middlesbrough towards the back end of the game, and Borough just break quickly. But it didn't necessarily feel like that whilst watching the game. And of course, that second goal does come through Emmanuel Latte-Lath, and it is a good quick counter from us, really. Greenwood flicks it onto Force. Force lays it off on one touch into a load of space in the middle of the pitch. And the road runner gets to the ball first, flies forward, and as he's driving towards that left-hand side of the box, I'm fully anticipating him to just pull the trigger with his left foot and watch the ball fly and hit the back of the north stand, really. But I was pleasantly surprised to see him check back in, send Marlon Romeo sliding like that Sol Campbell clip versus Croatia years and years ago for England. And a lot was said about Latte-Lath losing his footing, but actually, if you watch as he sort of picks himself back up again, he doesn't just look to get the shot away straight away. He actually steadies himself, sort of thinks what he's going to do before he gets the shot off, and just sort of whips it in that far corner with a little bit of height on the ball as well to beat Anik's leg. But yeah, really promising signs actually from Latte-Lath there with that finish. Of course, we've made a lot of judgment on him so far from the finishing that we've seen of him, that he's quite erratic in front of goal, but that was anything but, really. Cool, calm and composed, and it won us the game nicely.
Yeah, and I said the sort of talking points coming out of the stadium was obviously Lucas Engel, apart from the 3 points, and I guess you could probably group those two together, actually. And the main talking points was actually the two of the summer signings had their say on the game. And yeah, I think that was probably the most pleasing point from Tuesday night, and the fact that, as well as Engel, Latte-Lath, who has not really, to be fair, when he's been on the bench up until the previous two games, he hasn't really been introduced from what I can remember. And actually, we saw against Cardiff that, if it is going to be Josh Coburn going forward in terms of someone leading the line and then introducing a striker later on in games, I don't think he'll be best pleased long term if that's his role, but he's certainly a very effective substitute, because for tired legs in a defence, he is the worst nightmare that you could possibly imagine. I can only imagine Latte-Lath being introduced on the sort of 75th minute mark against the Roods Arms, where someone like you were in defence, and being stretched in behind by a fast striker, Nathan. I can imagine that being a horrendous situation for you. But no, in all seriousness, the speed that he shows is just ridiculous. I'm sure many people have seen it and obviously seen the highlights, but the sheer amount of ground that he makes up from that still frame of when it first is laid off by Marcus Force is ridiculous. And, you know, a lot of people have been quick to sort of draw the comparisons of Adama Traore, but I think we all knew that his movement and his pace were two of his attributes, but we didn't realise how quick he actually is, because it's a ridiculous burst all of a sudden out of nowhere. The afterburners are activated and he leaves the Cardiff defender in the dust, really. And as you say, the most pleasing part about the whole goal is just that he composes himself and then picks his corner. And, you know, given we'd spoken about his erratic nature in front of goal, I think that'll have done his confidence the world of good. So, yeah, a fantastic result. And, you know, going into the game, as we've said, it was against a Cardiff side that were by no means going to be pushovers. And I felt that, you know, in the second half, yes, as we've mentioned, it was always going to be a case of who scores first is probably going to go on and win this game. But Cardiff were no pushovers. We really had to work for that first goal. And obviously when we got the opener, we go and finish the job later on in the game, Nathan. So obviously plenty of positives to take from that. I think there's even more positives to take, probably even more than 4, to take from the fact that Middlesbrough turned up at the Stadium of Light yesterday, live on Sky, I may add. And despite some early controversy and the pitch being nearly unplayable from Sunderland tears, we just dismantled them, didn't we? Not what we expected at all. Nathan's nerves were uncontrollable this past week. Even in the podcast last week, I'm sure you can all remember me basically taking the mick out of him because he was so terrified. But Nathan was in attendance. I was watching the game. We'll talk about the lineups and some of the surprises really again there. But Nathan, is as far as yesterday goes, it's going to have to take something pretty remarkable to top that for a long time.
Yeah, it is. Completely unexpected. Of course, things in the game that happened do play a part in the result a little bit. But I do not care in the slightest. We absolutely battered them to bits. And yeah, there's going to be plenty of goading going on for the foreseeable until we play them again. Yeah, to rock up away from home at your rival's ground where it's always a little bit hostile when you go there. From the minute that you sort of come off the slip road towards the Stadium of Light, you're getting pelters from different people hanging out of car windows and all sorts. And you get off your bus or the train and you're walking through towards the ground, and you're usually walking through sort of a line of police, and you're getting pelters from all over calling you every name under the sun. And at full time yesterday, there was no one to be seen at all. It was just a nice leisurely walk back to the bus. No pelters, because they'd all gone home at 70 minutes. Bless them.
Yeah, well, I mean, Nathan, let's just get straight into it. I obviously referred to it a little bit earlier, but the team news, again, like Cardiff, was somewhat of a surprise. Of course, the main one, Riley McGree, not featuring in the squad. And we saw him come off against Cardiff late on with a little bit of a knock. We saw him holding his foot, or the back of his ankle, I think it was. And, you know, it looked fairly sort of a run-of-the-mill knock, you know, nothing that was going to keep him out of a game. But obviously it was a complete shock. There was no news in the press conference, which I guess was a positive, because given that they would have known our team lineup if there'd been an update on Riley McGree. It possibly played into our hands a little bit with a bit of a surprise element to our team selection. And yeah, of course, Ralph Vandenberg was withdrawn in the warm-up, so that was another surprise even minutes before kickoff. And then, Crooks come back into the team. Of course, Sam Greenwood retained his place. It would have been interesting to see whether he would have been included in that lineup had Riley McGree been available. And Tommy Smith comes in last minute. Darragh Lenihan and Johnny Howson both featured on the bench yesterday, but clearly weren't deemed fit enough to start, or perhaps in Lenihan's situation, Michael Carrick just felt that actually Paddy McNair didn't deserve to be taken out given the run of form that we've been on since he was introduced to the team. And yeah, Nathan, I've got to be honest, I saw the team, I saw the change of Tommy Smith for Ralph Vandenberg just before the game was about to be underway. And before the referee had blown his whistle to let proceedings get underway, I really was fearing the worst. Obviously, we know of the quality that they possess, especially in that front three. Jack Clarke, listen, Tommy Smith is extremely experienced, but the dribbling ability, the pace of Jack Clarke against Tommy Smith, it scared me a little bit, I'm not going to lie. And even Lucas Engel, despite the fact that he had a great second half in the week, I was fully expecting him to probably drop out actually, and perhaps had a different situation had worked out, maybe Tommy Smith might have started and Ralph Vandenberg may have played from the left. But Michael Carrick stuck with Engel, put a lot of confidence in him to allow him to retain his place, and all of those sort of worries and bits of dread in the back of my mind quickly disappeared in that second half. But in the first half, Nathan, it was a case of talking points from the referee and one huge save from Senny Dieng, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. But on the whole, I was really pleased with the first half, actually. It's always been a theme in this podcast where we talk about Borough's regular slow starts, but we didn't start slow. We were ready from minute one, and we sort of dominated the ball a lot in the early stages, which was really pleasing to see. Being comfortable in an environment where you sort of expect their crowd to be behind them in the early stages and sort of roaring them on and to try and sort of strip the game away from you in the early stages of the game. But that wasn't the case. We played our own game. We quietened the crowd a little bit in the early stages. And yeah, I was really impressed up until Patrick Roberts gets that ball on the right-hand side and the Borough defence and midfield just parts like the Red Sea and lets him have a free shot on goal from no more than 10 yards out. But yeah, Senny Dieng pulls off an incredible save there with his left boot. But yeah, as I say, in the early stages of the game, it was all from my view in the stand. I'm sort of gauging the atmosphere in the stadium as well. And their crowd was very silent up until that moment when Roberts drives through, gets that shot off. And then, of course, there's a little bit of a roar there that sort of gets them into the game a little bit more than they were in the early stages. But yeah, apart from that moment in the first half where they have that really good chance, I was pretty impressed actually with the way that we went about things.
Yeah, it was almost sort of the first leg of the playoffs against Coventry, that first half. It was similar to that, and that we had a home section of fans that were trying the best to get behind the team, create a really quite intimidating atmosphere, and actually Middlesbrough were able to just go into the Black Cat's den, not the Lion's den. And we're able just to completely tame the support, the noise, the occasion by just being patient with the ball, keeping possession, not making rash decisions. and basically just draining sort of the noise that way, I guess. And look, as you say, it was really impressive in that aspect. But for me, of course, it was a little bit different watching the game from home, seeing various moments in that first half with the benefit of multiple replays and angles. And something that is conveniently being left out of all of the post-match chatter and podcasts and news articles and tweets, etc., is the fact that Dan Neil, who was obviously sent off in the second half, stayed on the pitch. There was 2 huge calls from Jared Gillett in the first half, which actually I think a lot of fans in the stadium, Middlesbrough fans in the stadium, probably didn't even notice at the time. Obviously, one of which being the penalty decision that hasn't really got any coverage, to be honest. Matt Crooks is pushed over in the back, 2 hands by Luke O'Nien, and no penalties given. It's the most blatant penalty you're ever likely to see. But yeah, the referee misses it, and I think a lot in the stadium did too. But Nathan, there's been a lot of complaints about how Dan Neil was sent off, when in fact he was lucky to even have made it to the second half, the last few minutes of the first half, because the tackle on Josh Coburn, for me, and look, you see one today, the Kovacic tackle in the Arsenal game, fairly similar. The studs are up, the leg is straightened, he's out of control, and he's given a yellow card. And the sort of argument against it was, well, he doesn't make contact with Josh Coburn. Well, the intent is there. His studs are up. If he does make contact, he probably breaks Josh Coburn's leg. For me, that's a red card.
Yeah, I'd agree with you. Of course, in the ground, you could sort of see that he was high a little bit. But I thought that he may have just caught the top of his foot. Turns out that he's a lot higher than the top of his foot. Of course, Josh Coburn's very lucky in this instance that Dan Neil doesn't actually make contact with him at all. It sort of goes through Josh Coburn's legs. But yeah, it looks to me like that would be a red card. And I think if that is given as a red card, I don't think that Sunderland, Dan Neil, Tony Mowbray can have any complaints about that decision if it had been given as a red card. But it wasn't. It was only a yellow. Of course, as you mentioned as well, that Matt Crooks push being given no coverage upon seeing it again on social media. How it's been missed is beyond me. It's just blatantly 2 hands in the back. O'Nien's the wrong side, and yeah, it's outrageous, really. But yeah, of course, the first half goes on. Borough hit the post through Dan Ballard, skewing the ball sort of off it himself. In what was quite it was a bit of a weird chance, that one, really. We didn't have too many clear-cut chances in that first half. Of course, that chance does actually come from Greenwood firing an effort towards goal. But yeah, of course, with that one not being a red card in that instance, it leads us on nicely to his second yellow, which was strange to see in the away end, really, because the move happens. Borough try to break down the right hand side. Coburn gets tackled and it goes out for a goal kick. And then I saw the referee have his yellow card in his hand again, gives it to Dan Neil, and I thought, oh my God, he's been booked. It was almost like when John Buckley got sent off at Blackburn.
Yeah.
In December, where you don't know what's happened, but it's happened and it's gone in your favour. And I was like, Oh my God, he's gone. He's been sent off, and yeah, I think I was messaging you actually, trying to work out the reason for it. Didn't know if he'd sort of pushed someone off the ball as Borough were breaking forward, or if it was for dissent, which now we do. Well, now I know it was for dissent. For me, having read the post-match comments from Tony Mowbray, I think he's completely contradicted himself in the way that he said that the referee should perhaps have some empathy, that it's a young lad in a local derby, emotions are high. But before the game, the referee in the briefing with the captains and the managers said that gesticulating and abusing him for his decisions was going to be an immediate yellow card. And he's followed through with what he said, has Jared Gillett. And yeah, it's certainly upset a few Mackems, but I'm completely here for it. I think that the referee in that instance has made a really good call.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting in this case is, look, we've seen this season, there's been certain examples of, the referees in every division have cracked down on time wasting, on dissent, on kicking the ball away. And, I'm sort of a little bit not drawn, but I'm not so much one way where I think, yes, that should definitely happen, because what tends to happen is it's like a few years ago when they say that they were going to really, zone in on potential pulling and pushing in the box from penalties, from corners rather. And for the first sort of 4 games of the season, there's real consistency, and then it disappears for the rest of the season. And I think I'm always a little bit dubious when these sort of not new rules, but new bits of information come out, and you almost expect it to do the same, last for 3 games, and then not really happen again for the rest of the season. The likes of the new added time rules, I mean, that seems to be fairly inconsistent as well at the moment. But I think in this situation, and I know that officially that isn't the way in which a referee should act, but I think actually, having watched the game obviously live on the television, and you may have noticed it in the stadium, following the first yellow card that Dan Neil gets, he seems to wait and wait and wait, almost as if someone's in his ear telling him that actually that was probably a red card. And I don't know whether in the back of his mind he's thought, well, basically, if he gives me any reason at all, even if it's probably not a yellow card, I'm going to have to send him off the next time I get an opportunity. And I think that could potentially have been why he goes, because if you hear the quote as to what Daniel has supposedly said, he hasn't sworn directly at the referee. He swears in relation to saying, how is that how is that not a effing foul? Well, yes, okay, you shouldn't really be doing that in any case, but he's not sort of basically calling the referee this, that, or the other. And even during the game, as soon as he was sent off for obviously what he was sent off for, I immediately just thought, I think that's probably Gillett going back and perhaps making up for the mistake that he made earlier in the game, as opposed to actually giving him a second yellow for what he did in that instance. And to be honest, I'm still convinced that that's the case.
Possibly, yeah. But I think that the funniest sort of thing about it all is that the foul that he's actually complaining about is never a foul in a million years. It's Jack Clark having a dive in front of Tommy Smith, and yeah, it makes it a lot funnier that it's never a foul. But look, it's all said and done that, oh well, he hasn't sworn directly at the referee, but he's gave the referee a decision to make in terms of, is he just going to take the abuse from this player that has nearly broke Josh Coburn's leg earlier in the half, or is he going to crack down on it? And he does exactly that. Which, do you want to know what? Fair enough. If that's the way that you want to officiate a game, so that everyone knows that you're in control, that's fine by me. And
thing is as well, Nathan, is Sam Greenwood had been booked for dissent earlier in the first half. So Dan Neil's on the same pitch. He probably sees Greenwood get booked. Whether Greenwood has sworn directly at the referee or not, we don't know that. But he's seen that he's not afraid to whip out a yellow card just for dissent. So if Dan Neil knows that, he's already on a yellow card. Perhaps the argument should be made that you just keep your mouth shut and get on with it.
yeah, and I think also that really a lot of Sunderland fans are upset with the red card sort of changing the game a little bit. But as much as they probably don't want to say it, Dan Neil's cost them the game yesterday, getting himself sent off. I mean, first of all, the tackle is horrendous. He's chasing Joe Bellingham's pass. So I suppose you could sort of throw Bellingham under the bus a little bit there. But you have a player there in Neil who has earned himself a lot of plaudits over the last year since he's broke into the Sunderland side, and rightly so, because he's performed really well. But yeah, he's cost them the game yesterday by getting himself sent off. It was a very, very even game in that first half. Both managers have said it. It was two sides going toe-to-toe with each other, and it was a really even game in terms of both sides looked to be cancelling each other out. Both sides had a few chances each, and it looked very evenly poised going in that second half. And him getting sent off so late in that first half completely changes the game. Following the red card, of course, we then see a little bit of a melee, which for me, from my point of view in the end, it looked to me like Dan Ballard was trying to get a reaction out of Coburn to then, well, ideally get someone sent off from the Middlesbrough persuasion to even things up again. Actually, Josh Coburn gives him a little sly elbow, which is quite nice that wasn't picked up on. But yeah, yellow.
Oh, gosh, that.
Yeah, yellow cards for the pair of them. But yeah, as I'm stood in the away end, a lot of the Borough lot are giving it, go on, Teesside aggro, yada, yada, yada. I'm actually pooing myself because I'm fully anticipating a reaction from a Borough player that then even things up. And then it's level pegging again in terms of members of each team on the pitch. But yeah, Michael Carrick on the pitch as well, splitting things up was brilliant. It got us in at half time, 0-0, but 10v11. Borough very much having the advantage there. But still, I was saying to people in the ground at half time, said, I'd still take a point. I'd still take a point completely.
What Dad said the exact same thing at half time. Even with the way the first half had gone, exactly the same of you. He's like, no, we'll take a point here. You know, we played quite well. We just need to. I think he used the phrase, we just need to see out the second half. And I thought, we've got a man advantage.
Yeah, it was a funny conversation that I had with a guy that said, nah, he said, I'm not taking anything apart from 3 points from here. Anyway, I saw him at the end of the game. He said, will you still take a point? I said, yeah. But yeah, it leads us on nicely into the second half. And yeah, as mentioned, the game was completely changed on that red card because Sunderland offered nout in that second half. Of course, me as the very pessimistic fan, going to the Stadium of Light yesterday, was very, very wary of Sunderland on the break in this game. Didn't want Borough to be throwing too many bodies forward in search of the opener, but we certainly had a massive chance prior to the opener, which was Isaiah Jones down that right-hand side. The ball to Matt Crooks, who's coming in at that back post, is inch perfect. The pace on the ball, the direction in between the centre-half Ballard and Patterson in goal. It was in that corridor of uncertainty. Crooksy gets there, lifts the shot, and I couldn't believe that Patterson saved it. I just thought, this is never going to be our day, is it? I thought it's just going to be one of them going in the second half. He makes a really, really good save. But of course, then we go into the lead and take it away, Chris.
Well, yeah, I mean, my favourite part about the whole goal, forget the sort of narrative around Sam Greenwood being a Sunderland fan, a boyhood season ticket holder, went to Wembley to watch them in a cup final, ironically enough, alongside Dan Neil. My favourite part of the goal is the fact that Dale Fry finds himself on the left wing and actually delivers a really decent ball into the box for Greenwood to then divert goalwards and give Borough the lead. Yeah, a fairly bit of unfamiliar territory for the big lighthouse. But I tell you what, a little bit of a swivel in that left-footed ball into the box. We've seen Carrick be a little bit experimental in terms of position changes. Who knows? Dale on that left. It could be something to look at going forward. But yeah, it comes from a corner, doesn't it? And it's whipped in. It breaks for a little spell, and as I say, then Dale finds himself on the left wing. And for the life of me, to be honest, and look, I absolutely love Dale Fry for everything that he brings to this Middlesbrough side. Local lad, captain in the side yesterday, will head a brick wall, will tackle his grandma if he has to. And one thing that you don't expect from him is to be delivering quality into the box on his weak foot. And he does that. And I mean, the script just writes itself, doesn't it? Sam Greenwood, ex-Sunderland player, as we say, Sunderland boyhood fan. His dad was in the Borough end despite being a massive Sunderland fan, which I had an enormous amount of respect for Greenwood for sticking his dad in with the Borough fans. And yeah, he pops up, and it's quite a difficult finish, really, because you look at the angle and he manages to sort of adjust his body to open his body up and really divert the ball with his right foot high into the net. I think it probably takes Patterson by surprise more than anything, the power and the height that he generates from, it's not exactly a whipped ball in. It's a decent cross, but it's not a sort of threatening one. If Greenwood doesn't make first contact, Sunderland just clear it quite easily, probably. But he gets in front of his man, diverts it goalwards, and Nathan, I mean, take it away from a away end perspective. I'm sure there was a few bruises and injured in that first section of limbs from the day.
Yeah, it was quite the place to be in at that time, I'll tell you that. The goal, actually, as I'm watching it, I'll take you through the eyes of me in the away end. The ball comes from Barlasser to Engel on the edge of the box, and honest to God, it was going. Of
course, Engel goes to absolutely smash one in the top corner, and it was travelling that.
It was going in. It was going in, and behind it, it was arrowing into that near post, and yeah, it gets deflected away, goes to Dale Fry on that right, on the left hand side. He delivers the ball, and it's a really good finish from Greenwood, as you mentioned. And as soon as I've seen the ball skim the roof of the net, I can't really remember what went on, if I'm honest. Just flying all over the place, hugging everyone, as you do. There was blokes with the tops off. blokes with the shoes off, blokes laid out upside down on the stairs. Absolutely incredible. I was bouncing on a seat. It was absolutely ridiculous. And having been at Sunderland away in the past, and especially the previous game in January, I anticipated that despite it being October and early October as well, I anticipated it being quite a chilly day up in the gods. So I've got my big coat on. My God, did I have a sweat on after that? It was outrageous. But yeah, 1-0 up at the Stadium of Light. It felt like, as I said it to my brother, who I went to the game with, I said, we need to get this first goal in the game, because if we don't, they're just going to sit in and try and defend for their absolute lives. But yeah, we make that breakthrough. And from then on, it was really the most comfortable of afternoons that I think you could ever have, really.
Yeah, it was. Just going back to the sort of melee before half time, Middlesbrough could have quite easily come out for the second half, absolutely rallied up for all the wrong reasons, and wanted to sort of make it a little bit of a fight. And what was really great in terms of, we've spoken about it a lot of times, Middlesbrough come out from the half time and sometimes will concede a quick goal and it's a lapse in concentration. As soon as Middlesbrough come out for the second half yesterday, even for the period before the goal, I know it's sometimes different. You sense the atmosphere and things like that when you're in the stadium. But from watching it on the TV, as you say, as soon as we found that first goal, the game was always going to open up a little bit, even if Sunderland did have 10 men, because they had nothing to protect at that stage. And when we did find that opener, we were patient enough, we got the opener. And then, well, as you say, really, from that stage, Sunderland just absolutely capitulated. Crooks's goal is obviously I don't want to say the big turning point, because even the first opens the game up, but then the second just seemed to, I don't know, it had an even worse effect on Sunderland. They just completely lost their heads. Luke O'Nien, obviously, for goals after this, I think is it the fourth when Force puts it in? I think so.
The third, where he drags Latte
Yeah,
down.
the third, sorry. Obviously, we'll speak about the second goal first, but Luke O'Nien, his head's gone. Other Sunderland defenders are at 6s and 7s for the rest of the game, not knowing who to pick up or where to be. And as I say, it was just completely not a capitulation. But on the second goal, Nathan, a lot of talk going into this game, and rightfully so, was centred around Jack Clarke, the division's top goal scorer. Obviously had an extremely large amount of interest in the summer from Premier League sides. Even I said, when Tommy Smith come into the team, I was slightly concerned. Not necessarily because it was Tommy Smith, but I just know that Jack Clarke is that much of a threat in the Championship. Well, if there was one winger that was the talking point of the game following the full-time whistle, it certainly wasn't Jack Clarke. It's the man that tees up the big tree for the second goal, Nathan.
Yeah, he's back. It was like the Hull away, the Hull at home game last season, where you just have that Isaiah Jones game where, for a spell in the game, he just takes the game away from you because he's that good. And I was saying, having Isaiah Jones in an open game against 10 men, it's almost like suicide, really, for the opposition, because they're just going to get nowhere near him. When he's got space to drive into, he's going to get you. That's it. And he gets the ball. And the most impressive thing about, not even necessarily the move, but just the fact that we get the goal as soon after the first as we do then get the second, a minute later, is they always say that you're at your most vulnerable as you score. because you're all sort of, your adrenaline's pumping. You've scored your goal, and you sometimes lose focus. Borough just turned it on. Following our first goal, Jones gets that ball on that right hand side, sizes up Jack Clark. I don't know where the Sunderland left back is, if I'm honest. But seeing Jack Clark against Isaiah Jones, with Jack Clark having to defend against him, the poor kid just sat on his ass for him, didn't he? Bless him. He just went to ground. Was no point in him even being there. Jones just skipped past him as if he wasn't even there, drove into the box. And the most impressive part is he delays, even takes an extra touch that sort of disrupts the Sunderland defenders a little bit because they're anticipating the cross earlier. And he lays it right on a plate for the tree. His ball goes straight through the legs of Luke O'Nien, which is the most pleasing thing ever. I'm glad that knobhead wasn't on commentary again, because that was awful last year. So hold that, Luke, kid. And yeah, the tree comes in no more than 6 yards out, buries it in the top corner. And I'm going to be honest, up until full time, I didn't know who scored the second goal. Because I was just in a different postcode in terms of my head. I was just jubilant. Could not believe it. 2-0 up in a matter of minutes. It was a completely insane moment in that away end that you haven't even got over the first goal. And then you see Jones breaking into the box, and you probably heard it on Sky, the collective go on as he skips past Clark, and then the silence, and then just the raw, which, yeah, it was unbelievable. Did not know what was going on. What I did see from the away end was Isaiah Jones over one side, and a lot of the other players over the other side going to wheel away with the goal scorer, who I didn't know at the time. But that Sky coverage is absolutely gold, isn't it? Really is. It really is. What a video that is.
Yeah, well, I mean, we've got, I guess, shithouse analysis to get at here. We've got 2 sections of it. So, as you say, the big tree puts the ball in the back of the net, and we'll focus on where the side where the ball's come from in this instance first. So Isaiah Jones obviously sees the tree, run off and celebrate, and just takes it upon himself to turn around to the home fans and give it one of them. And for audio listeners, you can probably imagine what I'm doing. Fingers to the lips. He was, I mean, it's perhaps one of the most, in future years to come, it may become one of the most iconic images of a Middlesbrough Sunderland game ever, because the still screenshot of him with the biggest smile on his face, or trying to contain the biggest smile on his face in the world, with his fingers to his lips, with Hayden Hackney also giving it to the home fans behind him, and Tommy Smith producing a WWE-esque sort of grab from behind to basically stop him potentially putting the kiss of death on and winding up the home fans even more, all in one still image, is just perfection. It is chef's kiss. It is everything that we could have only dreamed of prior to the game. So there's that alone. I mean, even that by itself would have been just as iconic. You then go to the other side of the pitch, and the big tree takes it upon himself to rattle the home fans even more by whipping out the one-arm celebration and mirroring certain Alan Shearer at the Stadium of Light. Now, a lot of Sunderland fans, and rightfully so, have said, well, this is embarrassing. What's he doing? Middlesbrough are meant to hate Newcastle. I can't understand that. And at the time, I thought, I mean, it's really, really triggered them. But there's a part of me which wants to hate that, but I kind of love it. And listen, of course, the Newcastle element of it is not great, but the way I'm looking at it, Nathan, is before he'd even played for Newcastle, Alan Shearer was a Blackburn player. He did the same celebration. Yes, okay, he happens to be from Newcastle and he is a local hero for lots of Newcastle fans. But perhaps the big tree was, he loves his football by all accounts. Perhaps he thought it out as, well, I'm going to do this celebration as the Blackburn Rovers version of Alan Shearer. And even though he is a Newcastle born and bred legend in them parts, this is not me mirroring a Newcastle player's celebration. It's me mirroring a Blackburn player's celebration that just so happens to be hated universally by every single Sunderland fan. It gets put on Twitter, and to be quite honest, it's rattled exactly the type of people which I put it on Twitter for.
Yeah, it's perfect, really, isn't it? They're a funny bunch anyway, but the fact that yesterday happened the way it did just makes it 10 times better. The funniest type of people ever when a meltdown ensues. Just wow, what a funny club. Yeah.
Last week's podcast, you were struggling to get your words out because you were so scared. This week, you just pure, still on cloud nine, can't get your words out, just out of still the excitement's written all over your face for audio listeners again. I mean, yeah, it was. We're only 2 goals in, Nathan, and we're sort of. This podcast could go on for another 4 hours whilst we talk about every single element of every goal.
Yeah, it could. But yeah, I think one thing that I'd like to say is Hayden Hackney, as a Middlesbrough lad who has supported the club, well, probably since the team's been born, really, now playing in midfield for Middlesbrough against Sunderland. It's incredible shithousery, but it is also, he's just living every boy's dream, isn't he? With that, he's probably dreamt the night before of how, in the most perfect way possible, what would happen tomorrow, and to be 2-0 up, cruising at the Stadium of Light. You've just seen your teammate Isaiah Jones just absolutely, well, as the song goes, Clark will tear Clark apart.
Yeah.
And nutmeg the one and only Luke O'Nine. Yeah, to go over to that lot and give them the cup deers and just completely mock it is incredible, really. Yeah, the away end once again, absolute raptures. And it only got better from then on, really. Me still being quite pessimistic once I'd calmed down and my heart rate had chilled out a little bit from celebrating the goals, was still very much just worrying because you just never know with Middlesbrough, do you? So thought 3, and then I can properly settle down. And yeah, I suppose it wasn't within a 2-minute gap from the second goal going in. We had to wait possibly 10, 11, 12 minutes for the next one. But yeah, some changes to the side. Latte Lath came on, Morgan Rogers came on for Coburn and Crooks, and Rogers does really well. Robs Joe Bellingham off the ball in the middle of the park and plays Isaiah Jones through on that right side. He's in absolutely acres of space. The left back's just nowhere to be seen. Of course, as mentioned earlier, Luke O'Nine is just looking like a League One player in this instance, try to pull that Elath down.
Yeah.
he actually ends up on the floor himself whilst Lat's still breaking through. Jones has got the ball. He does really well to compose himself in this instance. Travels towards the box, cuts inside Ballard, steadies himself, and just neatly with his left foot slots the ball through the legs of Patterson. 3-0, runs over, gives it the tee. I'm still yet to know what this means, but I'm all for it. And yeah, the fact that he's, again, twice in a week, a little bit offside is a little bit, makes it even nicer, I suppose.
Yeah, I think on this occasion, the Cardiff one could have been in question. There's an angle yesterday. I'm not sure if you've obviously seen it, but he's offside. I mean, he really, really is offside in this situation. There's no sort of if, buts, and maybes. He's offside. But at the end of the day, I couldn't care less, and it probably, as you say, makes it even more sweeter. Isaiah Jones, I mean, I think I saw on Twitter that it's the first time that he's scored consecutive goals in consecutive games in a Middlesbrough shirt. Fantastic. But given the story of Isaiah Jones that we all know about, his breakthrough under Warnock and then under Wilder, some of the personal problems that he's had off the pitch, even him breaking into the team last season and then sort of struggling again to find form this season up until recently, Middlesbrough have put this run of form together and somewhat turned a corner. He wasn't consistently getting games, and the Isaiah Jones of late, okay, yes, we're always going to see little bits of inconsistency. It's the type of player that Isaiah Jones is. But as you say, when he's on form, he really is on form. And you just can't stop him when he's in a mood like he was yesterday. And it's such a nice... I think out of the whole squad, look, there's so many players in there, the core of players in terms of that were involved last season as well, where it sounds ridiculous because we're supporters, but you almost feel like you know them. You've seen them over the years. They've played for the club for long enough where you hear stories about them around the town or the way that they are with supporters. In Isaiah Jones's case, you listen to him on podcasts speaking about him and his personality and what's gone on for him. But seeing him smile and seeing him score and play at his best is one of the most enjoyable things, I think, for most Middlesbrough fans, because he is the most smiliest of lads. And even in his post-match interview with Sky Sports yesterday, you can just see he's just struggling so much to contain his excitement and contain his smile, potentially even his laughter at what he's just been a part of. And it's just so lovely to see, to be honest.
Yeah, and I think genuinely, I don't necessarily think I'm getting too carried away just based off yesterday, but Isaiah Jones in full flight, in the best Isaiah Jones that we have seen him as, is probably up there with one of the most entertaining players that I've had the pleasure of watching for Middlesbrough, really, when he gets at fullback. And I just think that they can't stop him, really, when he's in full flight. And that was certainly the case yesterday for Jack Clark, which makes it even nicer as well. But yeah, Jones, goal and an assist yesterday. For me, as a fan of Middlesbrough that also plays FIFA or EAFC, we got Riley McGree in form last week. I dare you, I dare you for Isaiah Jones.
I've seen a little bit of a concept doing the rounds on Twitter, which I've already sent you, and I know you're extremely excited about the potential of that. So yeah, for any FIFA or EAFC players, it's like me calling X Twitter still. I'm always going to call it FIFA, Nathan, so just call it for what it is. But yeah, Nathan, it didn't end there. It only got better. Marcus Force comes on and provides just another bit on the endless list of shithousery throughout the full afternoon. Comes off the bench, Actually, I laugh just on him before we talk about Forza's goal. Thought he looked really exciting off the bench yesterday, full of energy from what we've seen. But I think that goal in midweek has definitely given him a boost, and obviously the goal against Bradford as well. Looks to has all of the attributes that we saw in them first couple of games, where he terrifies defenses. He's so quick, his movement, and just his athleticism and his sort of willingness to chase every loose ball it's such a, as I said earlier, I don't think he'd be happy if it lasted the full season, but in games like yesterday, to bring a player like that off the bench, I mean, as a defender, you're just putting your head in your hands, aren't you?
I was putting my head in my hands for the defenders whilst I was stood in the away end.
Yeah.
As I've seen Coburn's coming off and seen Lath come on against 10 men that are 2-0 down, I just thought, bloody hell, I'm glad I'm not Dan Ballard.
Yeah.
Because he's not just a pacing behind either. He's a pain in the arse for a defender who is as aerially dominant as Dan Ballard. Because although he's small, my God, has he got one hell of a leap on him, by the way. It's something to behold,
Yeah.
honestly. But yeah, for the goal, the fourth, the cherry on top of the icing, on top of the cake, Silvera actually plays a really neat ball down the side for Lath. He gets that shot off towards the near post of Anthony Patterson's goal. Patterson can only parry it away, and yeah, I don't know whether it's just a case of when it rains it pours, but it's straight into the path of Marcus Forss. He doesn't even have to break stride really, and he just neatly slots it in with his left foot. And of course, as you mentioned, a little bit of shithousery there with his celebration. it's great. It probably sums up the home fans a little bit in terms of glum faces. Just give us a smile, will you? But yeah, Borough in the second half, all lays from the away end. Senny Dieng, what a man in terms of his Instagram post, but also in terms of his performance yesterday. Made a really good save in that second half as well, at his near post. The Senny Dieng chant, fantastic. Super Senny Dieng in goal, lovely. Although it's the same as every goalkeeper chant in the full country. I literally am not bothered.
Could do with an original chant for him. I think I've heard that quite a fair few times now.
Yeah,
he does it though. That's the thing.
He does. And my favourite one of yesterday, which I don't know if you did hear on Sky, Chris, was Tony Mowbray is a red, is a red, is a red. Tony Mowbray is a red. He hates Mackems.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, at that stage, as you say, it got to the stage where the Stadium of Light had emptied. All you could hear was the Middlesbrough fans. Numerous chants were coming out. I heard the Johnny Woodgate chant. Obviously, also heard the Tony Mowbray chant, which you may have not known about, you may have not seen. In his pre-match press conference, Mowbray had said that his son was in the Middlesbrough end. He's still a season ticket holder, so I think he was fully expecting, regardless of the result, one sort of side of the family to have a little bit of bragging rights, even though Tony Mowbray at heart is still a Middlesbrough fan. I think he'd probably admit that, to be honest. But his son certainly had the bragging rights in the Mowbray household. And yeah, I mean, that one would have just, I'm sure, emptied the stadium even more at that stage. All round, in terms of as perfect as a derby that's not a derby can go for Middlesbrough away from home, it pretty much ticked every box, didn't it, Nathan?
Yeah, it really did. I mean, to score 4 goals at any ground is something really that doesn't come around too often. But to do it away at Sunderland, it's our biggest win at Sunderland ever, which was nice, I suppose, to be in attendance for. I don't think I'll ever get to see something like that ever again, probably, in terms of just going there when both sides are evenly matched in terms of what they can offer in a game and be so dominant. Of course, 10 men plays a little part in that, but Borough were ruthless in the second half. They were patient in terms of getting the opener, and then from then on, with the chances that we created, we scored pretty much every time we went forward. Really, so yeah, a very very pleasing day yesterday when at 9 o'clock yesterday morning, getting ready to leave to go and get the coach, sort of thinking to myself, why am I even bothering going? Because because I was fully anticipating a defeat, because I'm a very pessimistic fan. But yeah, 4-0 at the Stadium of Light, it doesn't get much better than that, really. In terms of the league table, it hasn't necessarily changed positionally too much, really, from Tuesday night, which was Borough in 16th place. It's hell of a lot nicer than being in the relegation zone, I'll tell you that. But a few points off the playoffs now, Chris.
Yeah,
It's quite outstanding that a few weeks ago you were putting questions to me that had been sort of circling around on social media about Michael Carrick's future, and 5 wins in a row. The Borough go marching on, I suppose.
yeah. Look, it's quite ridiculous in terms of, I looked at the fixtures following the last international break before the EFL kicked off again, or club football in general rather. And I thought, you look at this run of games and you think, typically in the past, Michael Carrick, Steve Gibson has sacked his managers in October, and you kind of looked at the Sunderland game and thought, well, if results don't pick up, and then you go into the October international break, having been beat off Sunderland, you do sort of fear the worst. And although we should stress, myself and you both throughout, I know I'm not saying that a large percentage of the fan base did by any count, but there was certainly that percentage of people who were sort of growing a little bit more fond of the idea of Michael Carrick departing the club. It was growing result on result. We were never part of that. We always did sort of stick with the idea that although it might not turn around to the extent that it has at the moment, he was always the right man. But yeah, I mean, it's just incredible, the turnaround. And even then, I'm sort of almost nervous to say, well, have we turned the corner? But look, you've got to take it for what it is at the moment. And Michael Carrick, I'm sure, will have learned a lot about his squad in this section of games, because the turnaround has really come from Michael Carrick trusting in the players that he already had at his disposal, even last season. And I think perhaps as a young manager who had never had a summer transfer window, maybe, and it would probably be quite easy to do, he's got a load of new players that he fully believes in, courtesy of the recruitment team, who have all come from a range of different leagues, from varying levels of quality. And he probably just wants to go, yeah, there's all my new toys. Go out and prove that you're the new next best thing to replace Akpom, Giles, Ramsey, Archer. And I don't sort of look at that as okay, at the time it wasn't enjoyable in terms of looking at the results, but I think in terms of the looking into the future for Michael Carrick, it'll probably act as a huge learning curve, that actually maybe he should have done what he did in this section of games and bedded them in slowly. And actually, the way that he's done it, the new signings may have and probably will benefit from that as well. The fact that they've had a taste of it, but then been taken out, and then they can sort of have a little bit more time to acclimatise. They already know what they're going to be thrown back into if they have to be. And yeah, I mean, it's still, in the grand scheme of things, in regards to fixtures, it's still very early days. But because of the cup, because of these results during these section of games, again, Nathan, the main thing for myself and you, not only enjoying the results, it's become an absolute pleasure to do the podcast again. And for listeners and viewers, this is probably, I don't know how long we've been recording for, but it feels like about 4 hours. But I mean, it's been all full of joy, so it doesn't really matter. But it's certainly a lot more enjoyable than recording some of them early season podcasts.
It certainly is. Yeah, it was becoming a little bit of a chore having to come on and repeat the same thing over and over and over again. Oh, Borough got beat. Borough conceded a worldie again. Yeah, there was nothing Senny Dieng could do about that one because Andrea Dazelles launched one from 45 yards in off the stanchion. But yeah, 5 wins in a row against some pretty good sides in there as well. You haven't just sort of beat the sides that everyone expects you to beat. You played Southampton, who are one of the bookies' favourites for promotion. Okay, they're having a sticky patch at the time. They've soon turned a corner since then. Beat Leeds, beat Stoke. So that one, big one. It's the first win of the season, and it gave us a platform to build on. Went to Bradford, avoided upsetting the cup, gave a few players that possibly hadn't been getting the minutes under the belt early on in the season some minutes. Got through that one with a clean sheet, the first one of the season. You then go to Watford, where historically we never get anything really from that ground. And you go there, start really well by all accounts, go 2-0 up, face some adversity going 2-2, and then go on and win the game. Then he's had to deal with illness, injury, going into the Cardiff game. Sort of, as we've mentioned earlier on the podcast, made some changes to the side, raised some eyebrows with those changes. It worked. They've gone on, won that game against a side that before that game had won 4 games in a row and found themselves on the cusp of the playoff places early on in the season. And then, of course, you go to your local rivals away from home, which is probably arguably one of the most tough grounds to go to in the division, not just for us as it's sort of a derby game, but for any side in the division, really. And you go there, play really well in the first half, give up one chance of any note in that first half. And in the second half, of course, you're given that advantage, but it's not a given that you go on and just win that game because they're down to 10 men. You have to go out there and play your game. And as we did, we were patient, got that first goal, and then just went on and completely took the game away from them in some magic moments going forward. So yeah, honestly, so pleased that we were able to come on here and start talking about some wins again. And yeah, last week we were having the conversation about had Borough turned the corner. I didn't want to sort of jump the gun going into this week, but by God, have they showed me something this week that has sort of changed my opinion of them in the way that they've played in terms of the performances, but that they're starting to get results now. It's not just a case of perhaps being lucky in some instances. We're really starting to come together as the team, really, that were producing patterns of play last season, I'm starting to see those patterns once again, which is really pleasing to see. And now I'm looking at next weekend, gutted that it's an international break, gutted that I probably won't be seeing Riley McGree grace Wembley, and a weekend off next week of Middlesbrough, which is it's really unfortunate, especially because we've got Birmingham up next, which again, weirdly, I'd be looking forward to that game because of it. It's another good side that they've started really well. They've got 18 points on the board, but they are a basket case of a club, aren't they? From what we can gather
Yeah.
today.
Yeah, I mean, at the moment, it looks as though Middlesbrough will be coming up against a Birmingham side with a brand new manager in the dugout. And that manager may well be Wayne Rooney, obviously former Man United teammate of Michael Carrick. There hasn't been any official confirmation at the time of recording that John Eustace has lost his job. And by the way, this is no Birmingham podcast, but that would be extremely unfair on John Eustace. And to be honest, all of the Birmingham fans that I've seen on social media absolutely agree with that statement. But yeah, as you say, Birmingham are another good side. We've got them to play. We've obviously got the break first. And I think for me, of course, and for you, what you've just referred to there, it's really frustrating because we've got all this momentum built up now and we don't want to stop. But also, when you've built up this momentum, then you can sort of take a breath and look ahead and look up the table as opposed to looking down the table and kind of taking a breath in the instance of, oh, thank God we don't have to go into another game and potentially get beaten, for the criticism to increase again. But this international break comes at a time where we've had quite a few knocks, niggles, and injuries, and I think it might do the squad a little bit of good, actually. Gives them time to recover, gives them time to potentially have a few days away on holiday, relax, recuperate, and I'm sure be absolutely ready to go again. And I just hope that that momentum continues because, I mean, last season we all thought that, and then we played Huddersfield, and that pretty much derailed the whole automatic promotion campaign that we built up all that momentum with. I don't think we're quite at that stage just yet. But yeah, let's hope that that international break sort of serves its purpose in terms of getting some really important players back up to full fitness and full speed. And then we can use all of those players to really kick on and put some more wins together and extend this winning run. I think I joked about last podcast that it was going to be a podcast that sparked the beginning of an unbeaten run from then until the end of the season. Well, as we're currently recording, that is still on. So if we can get past the international break and do the next podcast and we're still unbeaten, then I think you have to start believing, Nathan, really.
Yeah, you probably do. And I just can't really get over the fact that we went to the Stadium of Light and absolutely demolished them. Really, from a fan's perspective, it was simply ridiculous seeing the fourth goal going, seeing that scoreboard at the opposite end of the ground with Sunderland 0, Middlesbrough 4 on. Truly, truly remarkable. And had you told me a month ago at the last international break where we'd just been beat 2-0 at home by QPR that in a month's time Borough will have showed in the first 2 games after the break no signs of improvement at all, and then go on a run where you win 5 in a row, I probably wouldn't have believed you at all. So look, it's incredible to be talking about wins again, and long may it continue for the sanity and the mood of these podcasts, because it's much nicer talking about wins.
Yeah, it certainly is. And to be honest, Nathan, I feel like that is a nice place to end it on, with our sanity at an all-time high on this podcast. And yes, obviously we should say that the voting at the time of recording, obviously when this goes out, the voting period for the Football Content Awards will be over. We won't know for another couple of months how well we've done, whether we've placed, whether we haven't, whether we've won the award, we won't know. But I think on behalf of both of us, we have to say a massive, massive thank you, because whether it be Twitter, whether it be voting online, voting on Instagram and tagging us in that, we've been completely overwhelmed by even being nominated. And then that second rush of support that we've had has just been, well, a bit humbling, to be honest, really, Nathan. I don't want to sort of go too deep, but it's been, yeah, I mean, even when things weren't going well for Middlesbrough, the support was still there for the account. And we both, as I say, massively, massively appreciate it, Nathan, don't we?
Yeah, it's incredible, really, to see so many people voting for us in terms of the tweets, the votes. Of course, you go through and retweet every vote, which, as it's coming through on my phone, I'm like, bloody hell, how many people are voting for us here? It's unbelievable. But yeah, thank you very much, everyone, for voting for us. And yeah, we'll have to wait and see what goes on at Anfield in November. But yeah, fingers crossed. But yeah, maybe I should continue with my pessimism, because it's paid off in this instance with a 4-0 win at the Stadium of Light. So yeah, pessimistic going to Anfield in November.
Yeah, if it was in football terms, we are heading to Anfield to try and nick a point, and anything else would be a bonus. So we'll wait to see me and Reina trying to hold out in the 90th minute to see what we can take away from there. But yeah, we'll discuss that at length, I'm sure, once we've been there in November, and we look forward to that massively. But yeah, a podcast that we never probably both thought we would record, but it's been an absolute pleasure, Nathan. So thank you for your time. Thank you if you've got to the end of this podcast. If you have, it's been an absolute mammoth one, but it's been full of enjoyment, full of jokes for the Sunderland fans, full of joy and happiness, and it's been a pleasure to record. So from me, Nathan, as always, if you watched on YouTube, please do like and subscribe. Audio platforms, give us a rating, subscribe on your audio platforms. And that has been another episode of the Boropolis podcast. And we will be back after the international break for another episode of the Boropolis podcast.